Deport your illegal wife. That single line, delivered by Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett on live television, stopped Donald Trump in his tracks. For a man who has built his political brand on shouting, mocking, and steamrolling opponents, this was the moment the script flipped. The air in the room shifted instantly. Gasps from the audience, cameras zooming in on Trump's reddening face. Melania, silent in her seat, looked down, visibly uncomfortable. What was supposed to be another night where Trump dominated the immigration debate suddenly became something much bigger. Crockett didn't just challenge his policies, she challenged his hypocrisy, right at its core, by pointing to the one person standing closest to him, his own wife. And in that moment, the stakes skyrocketed. This wasn't just about immigration policy or political theater anymore. This was about Trump's credibility, his image, and the very narrative he has sold to his supporters for years. Jasmine Crockett had turned the spotlight back on him, and for the first time in a long time, he had no ready answer. But how did we get here? How did one congresswoman force the former president into silence on his favorite stage, national TV? And what unfolded in the minutes after that comment sent shockwaves through the media, social platforms, and even within Trump's own circle. Stay with us, because what happened next didn't just humiliate Trump publicly. It revealed the dangerous cracks in his argument, the strength of a woman who refused to be bullied, and the deeper truth about why standing up at the right moment can echo far beyond one stage. The cameras cut to a wide shot of the stage, bright studio lights, polished podiums, and a crowd buzzing with restless energy. This wasn't just another political panel. It was a nationally televised town hall, carefully choreographed to give Donald Trump a platform to hammer his familiar talking points: immigration, law and order, and his claims of protecting real Americans. Trump stood tall at his podium, shoulders squared, his trademark scowl already set in place. He thrived on this kind of stage: the spotlight, the crowd, the chance to spar with critics and paint himself as the warrior of his base. On this night, he was confident. His supporters in the audience were ready to cheer at every punchline, every jab at Democrats, every story of a broken border. He was at home in chaos. But seated just a few feet away was someone he couldn't easily dismiss: Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. Known for her sharp wit and refusal to be intimidated, Crockett carried herself with calm focus. She wasn't there for theatrics. She was there for truth. Every movement of hers was measured: the way she leaned slightly forward when Trump spoke, the way her eyes stayed locked on him, not the cameras. Unlike others who had wilted under his constant barrage of insults, Crockett radiated a quiet readiness. And then there was Melania. Positioned off to the side, she sat with practiced elegance. Her face was unreadable, her posture stiff. Though she rarely spoke at these events, her very presence was symbolic, a reminder of Trump's family values image. But for those who knew the whispers and controversies about her early years in America, her silence carried its own tension. The atmosphere was electric, unpredictable. The audience was split. Half were loyal Trump supporters waiting for his next bombastic line. The other half, curious skeptics or critics, bracing for fireworks. You could feel it in the room, the sharp edge of expectation, like a storm about to break. The moderator introduced the night's topic: immigration reform. It was Trump's bread and butter, the issue he had used to define his political career. He leaned in immediately, launching into his practice lines. "We have an invasion at our borders. These people come in, they take jobs, they bring crime, and the Democrats don't care. They'd rather help illegals than protect American citizens." The crowd roared. Cheers, whistles, chants of "build the wall" filled the air. Trump smirked, feeding off the energy. He was in his element, basking in the applause, pointing fingers at Democrats and painting himself as the only solution. But as he continued, Jasmine Crockett sat still, her face unwavering. She tapped her pen softly against her notepad, not out of nervousness, but out of patience. She knew her moment was coming, and when it did, she was ready to cut through the noise with precision. Behind the stage, the production crew felt it too. The camera operators lingered longer on Crockett than usual. The director's voice crackled through the earpiece. "Stay tight on her. She's not blinking." This was no ordinary setup. The pieces were already aligned for a confrontation that would ripple far beyond this room. The tension wasn't just about policy. It was about truth colliding with performance. It was about one woman daring to hold a mirror up to a man who hated reflection. And it was about to erupt in a way no one in that room, not Trump, not Melania, not even the moderators, could fully control. The moderator had barely finished outlining the segment on immigration when Trump leaned toward the microphone, his voice booming with rehearsed certainty. "Look, folks, it's simple," he declared, hands slicing the air in his signature style. "Our country is being overrun. They're pouring across the border, they're taking jobs, and yes, they're committing crimes. And Democrats like Jasmine here, they're the reason. They want open borders. They want illegals flooding in. They don't care about your families. They only care about votes." The applause from his side of the audience was deafening. Supporters rose to their feet, some waving flags, others chanting, "USA! USA!" Trump basked in it, lips curling into a triumphant smirk. This was his battlefield, and he was used to winning here. Then he turned, eyes narrowing at Jasmine Crockett. His tone shifted from sweeping generalizations to a pointed jab. "Maybe instead of lecturing me, Congresswoman, you should open up your own home to these people. Maybe you should invite them to dinner, give your job. Let's see how you like it when illegals are sleeping in your backyard." The crowd howled with laughter, egged on by Trump's mockery. He leaned back, satisfied, confident he'd landed a blow that would rattle his opponent. But Crockett didn't flinch. She sat tall, her gaze locked on him, pen still between her fingers. The camera zoomed in on her face, steady, calm, unreadable. She let the noise of the crowd swell and then fade, as if giving Trump all the rope he needed. When the laughter died down, she leaned toward her microphone, her voice cutting through the room with deliberate clarity. "Mr. Trump, I don't need to invite anyone into my home to understand the value of immigrants. I see it every day in the people I represent, people who work, who sacrifice, who build this country up, while you tear it down with division." The audience murmured, some clapping lightly. Trump tilted his head, ready to interrupt, but Crockett raised her hand slightly, commanding the floor. Then came the pivot, the subtle shift from defense to offense. Her eyes flicked briefly toward Melania, then back at Trump. The pause was almost imperceptible, but the cameras caught it. "And before you lecture anyone about illegals," she said slowly, deliberately, her tone tightening like a coiled spring, "maybe we should start with your own household, because there are still questions about how your wife got here, questions you've never answered." The air cracked like lightning. Gasps rippled through the audience. Trump's smirk evaporated. He gripped the podium, leaning forward, his face flushing red. Melania shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her eyes dropping to the floor. The moderator, caught off guard, stammered, "Congresswoman, let's..." But it was too late. The words were out. The conflict was no longer about immigration in the abstract. It was personal. Trump supporters erupted in boos, while others in the crowd broke into applause. The room was divided, chaotic, buzzing with tension. Trump slammed his hand against the podium. "Don't you dare talk about my wife," he barked, his voice shaking with anger. "Don't you dare!" Crockett didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her calm was her weapon. Then stop using everyone else's wives and husbands and children as political scapegoats. If you can't stand the scrutiny at home, don't weaponize it against families across this country. The audience roared again, applause mixing with outrage. Camera shutters clicked furiously. On social media, clips of the exchange were already being clipped, posted, shared. Hashtags were beginning to form. But in the room, one thing was clear. The setup had become a battlefield. Trump had expected to dominate with bluster and insults. Instead, he had provoked a counterstrike that threatened not only his talking points, but his very image. The conflict was no longer hypothetical. It was live, raw, personal, and it was only just beginning. The stage had turned volatile. Trump's voice thundered through the hall, his fists tightening on the podium as he barked at Jasmine Crockett. "Don't you talk about my wife, you hear me? Don't you talk about her!" His supporters cheered wildly, trying to drown out the sting of her words. For years, this was Trump's playbook: raise his voice, dominate the space, overwhelm the opponent until they backed down. But this time, something was different. Jasmine Crockett didn't retreat. She didn't flinch. She leaned forward, microphone steady, eyes locked on him. Her calm presence was louder than his shouting. "Mr. Trump," she said evenly, "the difference between you and me is this. I don't run from accountability. My record is transparent. My service is public. But your record and your wife's immigration story, that's where the questions begin." The audience shifted uncomfortably. Gasps, a few scattered claps. The energy of the room began to tilt. Trump tried to cut her off. Lies, fake news, total disgrace. But Crockett raised her voice just enough to cut through his bluster. "Let's talk facts. When your wife came here as a model, there were allegations she worked before her visa allowed it. There were questions about how her green card was obtained. And you, sir, have never answered them, not once." The crowd erupted, half in cheers, half in angry boos. Camera flashes exploded like fireworks. The moderators looked rattled, scrambling to regain control. But it was too late. Crockett had opened the door, and the audience knew exactly what she was saying. "So before you weaponize the word illegal, before you label entire communities as criminals, maybe you should explain the story inside your own household." The words hung in the air like a verdict. For a split second, the hall went silent. Then an audible ripple spread through the crowd. Gasps, laughter, applause, even shouts. Trump's face darkened to crimson. He pointed across the stage, jabbing the air with his finger. "That's disgusting! You're attacking my family! You're attacking a wonderful woman!" But the room had shifted. For the first time, Trump wasn't in control. His anger didn't intimidate, it looked desperate. The contrast was striking. Him, red-faced and shouting, her, steady and unshaken. Crockett delivered the final push, her tone sharp but calm. "This isn't an attack, Mr. Trump. This is accountability. If you're going to build your platform on smearing immigrants, then the public deserves to know the truth about yours." The audience broke into thunderous applause. Even those who had stayed quiet before were now clapping, some even rising to their feet. The camera zoomed in on faces: shock, admiration, disbelief. Melania shifted again, her expression frozen, her gaze fixed firmly on the floor. She didn't move, didn't speak, but her silence said more than words. For the viewers at home, the effect was seismic. Social media feeds lit up instantly. Crockett just ended Trump live on TV. #IllegalWife is trending. This is the clapback of the year. On stage, the moderators tried to steer back. Let's move on. But no one was listening. The turning point had already arrived. Trump, for once, was rattled. His bluster no longer carried weight. Every shout only emphasized his loss of control. And Jasmine Crockett? She had done what few could:
punctured his armor not with insults, but with facts. The balance of power had shifted. The once commanding figure of Trump now stood exposed, his credibility shaken, his hypocrisy laid bare. And Jasmine Crockett, calm and composed, held the stage in a way that could not be ignored. The intervention had landed. The audience knew it, Trump knew it, and the story was already echoing far beyond that stage.
The energy in the room was electric, split down the middle. On one side, Trump's supporters roared in fury, booing and shouting over each other. On the other, Crockett's supporters and those who had come undecided sat forward in their seats, hanging on to her every word. Trump barked over her, "Lies! All lies! Fake news! She's a wonderful woman! Don't you dare!" His voice cracked with rage. But Crockett wasn't looking at him anymore. She was looking at the audience, and through the cameras, directly at America. "You want to talk about illegals?" she asked, her tone steady but sharp. "Let's talk about the truth." She raised her hand, counting off points with her fingers. 1. When Melania Trump first came here as a model, multiple outlets reported she was working before her visa allowed it. That's a violation of immigration law. 2. Her so-called Einstein visa? That's supposed to be reserved for individuals of extraordinary ability. And yet, to this day, no one has explained how she qualified or why those documents are sealed. 3. Donald Trump has never once allowed the public to see the full record. Instead, he smears families, communities, and entire nations while hiding the facts in his own home. The crowd gasped again, some breaking into applause. Camera flashes lit up the stage. Trump's face contorted with fury. "Wrong! Disgraceful! You're attacking women now! That's what you do!" Crockett didn't miss a beat. "No, Mr. Trump. What I'm doing is standing up for women, for mothers who cross borders for their children, for wives who live in fear because of the policies you put in place, for daughters who deserve better than to hear their families labeled as criminals by someone who refuses to answer questions about his own." Her words cut through the noise like a blade. The boos softened. The applause grew louder. Even some in the middle rows, who had cheered Trump earlier, were nodding now. She pressed forward, her voice firm but measured. "I've spent years working with immigrant families. I've seen them contribute to our schools, our hospitals, our businesses. I've watched them serve in our military, fight for our safety, and raise their children to love this country. That's not illegal. That's not criminal. That's the American story." The audience erupted in cheers. Hashtags lit up across social media. Hashtag American Story. Hashtag Crockett versus Trump. Hashtag Illegal Wife. Trump slammed his hand on the podium again. "This is a witch hunt. You people don't believe it, do you? This is disgusting." But Crockett turned back to him, her expression unwavering. "Mr. Trump, you have called immigrants rapists, criminals, and infestation. You built cages for children. You tried to ban entire religions from this country. And yet, when asked about your own wife's history, you hide. That's not strength. That's hypocrisy." The words landed heavy. The crowd roared again, this time louder. The sound was no longer evenly split. Crockett's voice was breaking through the noise, through the fear, through the theater. She let the applause settle before continuing, lowering her tone to a near whisper, forcing everyone to lean in. "Here's the truth. Immigration is not a weapon. It's not a punchline. It's not your campaign slogan. It's people, families, sacrifices. And if you can't respect that, then you have no right to stand here and call yourself a leader." The silence that followed was deafening. Then, slowly, the room erupted again, this time in sustained, thunderous applause. The cameras caught it all, Trump's jaw clenched, his eyes darting, his fury boiling over, and Crockett standing firm, her presence radiating strength. She had done more than defend herself. She had revealed Trump's weakest point, his hypocrisy. She had turned his favorite weapon, fear of immigrants, back on him, exposing the cracks in the story he had built his career on. And in that moment, the audience could feel it. Trump's grip on the narrative was slipping. Jasmine Crockett wasn't just surviving his attacks, she was rewriting the script. Trump was seething. his face flushed red, his hands gripping the podium as if it were the only thing holding him upright. He bucked into the microphone. "You don't talk about my wife. You don't bring her into this. That's off limits. Shame on you, Jasmine. Shame on you." His voice cracked under the strain. The audience, sensing his unraveling, buzzed with chaotic energy. Some cheered his outrage, others booed. Many simply stared, stunned by what they were witnessing. A man known for his dominance, suddenly losing control. But Jasmine Crockett remained calm. She let his anger echo, let his words bounce around the hall. Then, slowly, she leaned forward into her microphone. "Mr. Trump, you don't get to decide what's off limits when you've made entire families the target of your cruelty. You don't get to hide behind outrage when your entire political career has been built on attacking women, immigrants, children, and anyone who can't fight back." The crowd roared. Applause and cheers cut through the noise. Crockett didn't smile, didn't gloat. Her expression remained serious, steady. She was speaking not for points, but for truth. Trump tried to interject, waving his hand, shouting over her, "That's not true! You're lying! Lying!" But Crockett pressed on, her voice rising just enough to carry above his. "You call immigrants criminals, yet your own story is built on one. You call women nasty when they dare to challenge you, yet you expect the world to shield yours from scrutiny. That is not leadership. That is cowardice." The audience erupted again, louder this time, sustained applause that drowned out Trump's attempts to shout back. Crockett paused, letting the cheers roll. Then she delivered the line that would be replayed on every network highlight reel for weeks. "If you can't handle accountability in your own house, Mr. Trump, how dare you demand it from everyone else's?" The hall shook with reaction, clapping, whistles, even some shouts of "That's right!" Trump slammed his hand on the podium again, pointing furiously across the stage. But the more he shouted, the weaker he looked. The more Crockett held her ground, the stronger she appeared. She wasn't finished. She straightened her posture, her voice clear and unwavering. "I don't say this for myself. I say this for every immigrant child who has been called less than human. I say this for every woman who has been told to sit down and be quiet while men like you abuse their power. I say this for every family that has been ripped apart by your policies while you sit here pretending you are the victim." The camera zoomed in on the audience. Tears glistened in a few eyes. Some nodded vigorously, clapping until their hands hurt. Even those who disagreed with her couldn't deny the force of her presence. Trump, meanwhile, looked smaller by the second, flustered, frantic, muttering into the microphone about fake news and Democrat lies. But no one was listening to him anymore. The energy had shifted entirely. Crockett's composure was magnetic. She wasn't just answering his attacks, she was redefining the battlefield. Trump wanted a shouting match, she gave him accountability. He wanted chaos, she gave him clarity. And in that moment, the room dynamics flipped. The audience wasn't watching Trump's anger anymore, they were watching Crockett's strength. Every word she spoke resonated, not because it was loud, but because it was true. She closed her response with the calmest, most devastating line of the night. "Mr. Trump, leadership is not about fear. It's not about volume. It's not about making others small so you can feel big. Leadership is about honesty, about courage, and about facing the truth, even when it hurts. Tonight, you've shown us what you're afraid of. And I'm here to remind you, America deserves better."
The hall exploded in applause. The camera panned across the stage. Trump, red-faced and flustered, Melania staring blankly at the floor, and Jasmine Crockett standing tall, composed, unmoved by the storm she had just weathered. She had spoken her truth. She had responded not with fear, but with strength, and the audience knew it. The tide had turned, and Donald Trump had just been humbled, live on television, in front of millions.
The moment Jasmine Crockett delivered her final line, "America deserves better," the stage was no longer just a stage. It had become a flashpoint, the kind of exchange that would ripple far beyond that hall. The audience inside erupted. Some rose to their feet in a standing ovation, clapping and cheering, their voices carrying over Trump's futile attempts to shout her down. Others sat in stunned silence, unable to process what they had just witnessed. Donald Trump, a man who prided himself on humiliating opponents, had just been humiliated himself. But the real impact exploded online. Within minutes, Twitter, now X, lit up. Jasmine Crockett just ended Trump live on TV. Historic. #illegal wife is trending, and I am here for it. This is what courage looks like. Crockett greater than Trump. Clips of the confrontation flooded TikTok and Instagram. Memes of Trump's red face next to Crockett's calm expression spread like wildfire. Late-night hosts scrambled to rewrite their monologues. Headlines the next morning blared, "Crockett schools Trump on immigration hypocrisy," and "Trump meltdown after wife's visa question." Support poured in from unexpected places. Immigrant advocacy groups released statements praising Crockett for speaking truth to hypocrisy. Constituents from her district shared personal stories online, describing how her words made them feel seen. One post read, "My parents came here with nothing. Tonight, Jasmine Crockett stood up for them in front of the whole country." But with the praise came the backlash. Trump's allies went on cable news to defend him, calling Crockett's comments below the belt and an attack on family. Conservative commentators tried to spin the moment as evidence of Democrat desperation. Some even threatened her online, flooding her social media accounts with insults and doctored images. Crockett, however, was ready. She posted a simple, pointed response on her official account. "If speaking the truth about hypocrisy makes you mad, imagine living under it. I'll keep standing up, no matter how loud the shouting gets." The tweet went viral, cementing her composure and turning the attacks into proof of her resilience. Meanwhile, Trump's team scrambled. His campaign advisors reportedly urged him to pivot to avoid feeding the story, but Trump himself couldn't let it go. In rallies days later, he ranted about being disrespected and accused Crockett of lying to the American people. Yet each time he brought it up, the clips replayed, the hashtags trended again, and the story refused to die. The clash had also personal consequences. Rumors swirled about Melania's discomfort, with tabloids speculating about the strain it put on the Trump family. Her silence that night became part of the narrative, a haunting visual replayed in every highlight reel, Melania staring at the floor while her husband lost his temper. But for Jasmine Crockett, the aftermath was clear. She had stepped into a national spotlight and held her ground. Her inbox filled with messages of gratitude. Immigrant families, young women in politics, and ordinary citizens wrote to her office, "You gave us a voice. You gave us hope." And that was the deeper impact. Beyond the memes, beyond the trending hashtags, Crockett's confrontation revealed something essential, that one voice, steady and prepared, could cut through bluster and fear, that courage on a stage could inspire courage in living rooms across the country. By the time the week ended, pundits agreed on one thing. Trump had been rattled, and Jasmine Crockett had emerged stronger. The battle wasn't just political theater anymore. It was a moment of truth, and the echoes of it were only just beginning. When the applause faded, when the social media trends cooled, and when the headlines shifted to the next political firestorm, one question lingered. Why did this moment matter so much? Because at its core, the confrontation between Jasmine Crockett and Donald Trump wasn't just about Melania's immigration history, or even about Trump's hypocrisy. It was about something larger. Something every viewer, every immigrant family, every woman who has ever been underestimated could feel in their bones. It was about truth cutting through spectacle. For years, Trump had built his brand on bluster. humiliating opponents, dominating rooms with volume, and rewriting narratives through repetition. He had weaponized immigration as a political tool, turning people's lives into slogans and sound bites. But in one evening, Crockett flipped the script. She took the very subject he wielded against millions, immigration, and turned it back on him. She showed that even the loudest voice in a room can't drown out facts when they're spoken with clarity, courage, and conviction. The deeper message was this: being underestimated is not a weakness, it's an opportunity. Crockett wasn't the billionaire, the former president, or the celebrity on that stage. She was the congresswoman many assumed would be outmatched by Trump's force of personality. But she walked in prepared. She knew the history, she knew the facts, and more importantly, she knew who she was speaking for. That preparation met opportunity, and the result was a moment that will be replayed for years. And that's a lesson for anyone watching. Your work, your dedication, your integrity, even when no one's watching, becomes the foundation for the moment when you finally are. Crockett didn't just win a debate. She embodied the principle that quiet preparation always beats loud bravado when truth is on the line. The other thread that ran through this moment was advocacy. Crockett's defense wasn't about herself. It was about the families, the mothers, the children who often don't get a microphone. She stood as their advocate, showing the power of having someone who truly understands your struggle speak your name in rooms where you're not welcome. How many letters had she read from constituents about family separations? How many living rooms had she sat in, hearing immigrant parents tell her about working 2 or 3 jobs to keep food on the table? That lived experience gave weight to her words, and the people watching at home, many of whom had never seen themselves reflected in a national debate, suddenly felt seen. That is the heart of the deeper message. Representation matters. It matters in politics. It matters in workplaces. It matters in classrooms and communities. Because when someone like Jasmine Crockett stands firm, she isn't just speaking as an individual, she's carrying the voices of thousands who might never step onto a stage like that. The significance also stretched beyond politics. Crockett's courage reminded viewers that hypocrisy is always exposed eventually. Trump's attack on immigrants fell apart because he refused to hold himself to the same standard. And that principle resonates beyond elections, in workplaces where bosses demand loyalty they don't return, in communities where leaders preach fairness while cutting corners for themselves, in friendships where double standards corrode trust. The broader lesson is universal. Hypocrisy cannot survive in the light, and sometimes it only takes one steady voice to shine that light. Finally, the confrontation carried a ripple effect. For some, it became motivation to get involved, to volunteer, to register, to vote. For others, it was a personal reminder that silence is complicity and that courage is contagious. Viewers wrote testimonials. "I've been quiet at work while my boss makes unfair comments. After seeing Crockett stand her ground, I realized I don't have to stay silent." Stories like that showed the lasting significance went far beyond a viral clip. Because what Jasmine Crockett proved was this: politics isn't just about winning arguments. It's about shifting culture. It's about making ordinary people believe that truth still has power, that justice still has champions, and that courage, even in the face of ridicule, can still inspire millions. That's why the deeper message lingers. Do the work even when no one's watching. Prepare for the moment, even if it never comes. And if it does, speak with courage. Not fear, because somewhere, someone is waiting to hear a voice like yours break through the noise.
When the applause faded, when the social media trends cooled, and when the headlines shifted to the next political firestorm, one question lingered. Why did this moment matter so much? Because at its core, the confrontation between Jasmine Crockett and Donald Trump wasn't just about Melania's immigration history, or even about Trump's hypocrisy. It was about something larger, something every viewer, every immigrant family, every woman who has ever been underestimated could feel in their bones. It was about truth cutting through spectacle. For years, Trump had built his brand on bluster, humiliating opponents, dominating rooms with volume, and rewriting narratives through repetition. He had weaponized immigration as a political tool, turning people's lives into slogans and sound bites. But in one evening, Crockett flipped the script. She took the very subject he wielded against millions, immigration, and turned it back on him. She showed that even the loudest voice in the room can't drown out facts when they're spoken with clarity, courage, and conviction. The deeper message was this: being underestimated is not a weakness, it's an opportunity. Crockett wasn't the billionaire, the former president, or the celebrity on that stage. She was the congresswoman many assumed would be outmatched by Trump's force of personality. But she walked in prepared. She knew the history, she knew the facts, and more importantly, she knew who she was speaking for. That preparation met opportunity, and the result was a moment that will be replayed for years. And that's a lesson for anyone watching. Your work, your dedication, your integrity, even when no one's watching, becomes the foundation for the moment you finally are. Crockett didn't just win a debate. She embodied the principle that quiet preparation always beats loud bravado when truth is on the line. The other thread that ran through this moment was advocacy. Crockett's defense wasn't about herself. It was about the families, the mothers, the children, who often don't get a microphone. She stood as their advocate, showing the power of having someone who truly understands your struggle speak your name in rooms where you're not welcome. How many letters had she read from constituents about family separations? How many living rooms had she sat in, hearing immigrant parents tell her about working 2 or 3 jobs to keep food on the table? That lived experience gave weight to her words. And the people watching at home, many of whom had never seen themselves reflected in a national debate, suddenly felt seen. That is the heart of the deeper message. Representation matters. It matters in politics, it matters in workplaces, it matters in classrooms and communities. Because when someone like Jasmine Crockett stands firm, she isn't just speaking as an individual, she's carrying the voices of thousands who might never step onto a stage like that. The significance also stretched beyond politics. Crockett's courage reminded viewers that hypocrisy is always exposed eventually. Trump's attack on immigrants fell apart because he refused to hold himself to the same standard. And that principle resonates beyond elections. In workplaces where bosses demand loyalty they don't return. In communities where leaders preach fairness while cutting corners for themselves. In friendships where double standards corrode trust. The broader lesson is universal. Hypocrisy cannot survive in the light. And sometimes, it only takes one steady voice to shine that light. Finally, the confrontation carried a ripple effect. For some, it became motivation to get involved, to volunteer, to register, to vote. For others, it was a personal reminder that silence is complicity and that courage is contagious. Viewers wrote testimonials. "I've been quiet at work while my boss makes unfair comments. After seeing Crockett stand her ground, I realized I don't have to stay silent." Stories like that showed the lasting significance went far beyond a viral clip. Because what Jasmine Crockett proved was this: politics isn't just about winning arguments, it's about shifting culture. It's about making ordinary people believe that truth still has power, that justice still has champions, and that courage, even in the face of ridicule, can still inspire millions. That's why the deeper message lingers. Do the work, even when no one's watching. Prepare for the moment, even if it never comes. And if it does, speak with courage, not fear. Because somewhere, someone is waiting to hear a voice like yours break through the noise.